So our first topic stems from a conference we attended a few weeks ago.
Beyond teaching classes and doing all that kind of stuff is the stuff that happens after class.
And these are not just conversations we have with one another as faculty. These are the kinds of conversations that we enjoy with students after class.
Thanks for joining us. Another episode of the After Class Podcast. We're glad to have you along. Just want to be the first to wish you all a happy anniversary.
That's right.
Of the podcast, not of marriage or of anything else.
Unless it just happens to coincide with your anniversary, which, happy anniversary.
I was speaking to you all, not to the audience, but that's fine. So audience, happy anniversary to you too,
So
apparently.
If it applies.
it is, no joke, it is Beth and I's anniversary today.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, May 8th. Yep.
That's,
Well, happy anniversary to
Well,
you
thank
and
you.
Beth.
Well,
Yeah.
then sure. Happy anniversary, John.
Yeah.
We were not thinking of that. It's the anniversary of our podcast, so it's where it's a little confusing for some people. We're in our 7th season, but now we've wrapped up 6 full years of the podcast. So the next podcast will be the beginning of our 7th year of the podcast. Our seasons and our years don't quite line up. Either way, it's really actually a tremendous accomplishment. Most podcasts don't do what we've done in terms of producing weekly content, fresh content. People get bored or they lose the ability to come up with new ideas. We haven't done that, and so
Oh.
we've got
Fortunately,
a
the
good going.
Bible's pretty big.
Yeah.
Oh,
Lots of
And
things
church
to talk
history and
Right.
and contemporary issues and new spins on things. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're not going to run out of things to talk about.
I would say years of marriage is also impressive, but
Yes. I was
apparently
gonna
Ron only
say,
cares about the podcast, so that's fine.
31 years.
That is actually quite
Yeah,
impressive.
so,
31 years.
Yeah, to get Beth to stay with me that long has been
Yeah. Agreed.
a miracle.
She's a saint, to be clear.
Well, and you guys are recently grandparents, and so
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
like all these different areas where you're just moving into these great new stages of life.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, happy anniversary to us.
All right. Also, I'll be the first to wish you all a happy almost end of the semester.
Yes.
We're wrapping it
That's
up. Finals week. It's a busy but sort of, I wouldn't say relaxing, but like not the constant. I've got this class and this is like I'm in my office. I'm grading. I'm registering students. It's not as I don't know. It's different.
Yeah.
It
It's
is.
so close. We're so close.
Students graduate this Saturday.
Yep.
So then it will feel like summer has begun as
Yep.
far as students evacuating the premises. We still have until the end of May for faculty responsibilities and meetings and assessment and all that jazz. But as far as students are concerned, this is it. This is the last week.
Yeah, and Lord willing, I will have all my grading done. I mean, I've only got a couple little things to grade, so another couple of days, I should have all my grades in, which is unusual. It usually took me past graduation to get grading done, but last couple of years, I've arranged things so that it's not the case anymore.
And apparently they wanted to be remembered on their way out.
At least someone did.
There was another prank, this time not just on the three of us, but the whole faculty hallway. Students managed to get, I don't know, how would you describe what they did?
I would call it an homage to each of the professors. They pulled out chairs and put them in a sort of circle, and they put pictures of us in the chairs, and they put something that like stands for us. Like for me, it was like a soccer ball and a disc golf basket, and then
Yep.
for Lloyd, I remember that I saw a baseball bat and something. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like things that they probably think of when they think of us, they associate with us, and they were kind of all in a circle around Frank, and then it got weird, and after that.
Yeah, there were maybe fish in cups.
Every office had a fish in a cup.
That was
which-
named with a poem.
Yeah, we each had a poem that went with our fish. They didn't know what to do. The fish sadly didn't survive.
Every fish. So all of us walked into a dead fish in our office, which was not their intent. I'm pretty positive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
we
It's just
definitely-
what ended up happening. So we're all a little taken aback, like, is someone angry? Is this like the horse head in the bed situation?
right?
And I think it was just a oversight on how to care for fish.
Yeah, clearly that.
So what was meant to be kind of a cutesy thing turned up being a little gross.
Yeah, a little morbid. There's a
Little
lot
morbid.
of fish flushings today.
I just threw mine outside. I figured, throw
Oh,
it out in the grass. Some
okay.
animal will come. I didn't want it to go to waste. I mean, it's a dead fish, but some
Well,
animal.
the alligators in the sewers will eat the fish.
But we don't have sewers here. That's
There's
the problem. Yeah.
Or alligators. Okay. You're missing the bigger
Sewers
point,
are the problem.
Ron. Yeah.
I don't have a problem with alligators. I'm fine with alligators.
I have a problem with sewers. Oh, the sewers. Okay.
all those bad sewers. Well,
Yeah.
and the funny thing about our chairs being in a big semicircle, the only chair that wasn't was Todd's chair. They put it over a door. It was hanging on a door.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I wonder Like nobody's explained that to me. Why they thought that
I
was
think there's
appropriate
some
at the time.
bizarre creative improvisations. But,
It probably makes sense in their heads, just not
And-
to us.
Right.
Yeah.
We need a better explanation.
Well,
So,
speaking
yeah,
of flushing fish, just kidding.
Yeah, things go crazy at the end of the school year, and some years more than others. I'd say
Yeah.
this year definitely more than others. Other
I-
crazy things not to be
I agree
mentioned.
with that.
So yeah, today we believe we're going to wrap up this series on creation care in the Bible and what it says about it. We have 3 more passages, one from 2 Peter and 2 from Revelation, and then we're going to evaluate different ways of framing the Bible's cumulative message about creation.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we got a game plan, and we're pretty confident it'll be wrapped up this episode.
I'm done regardless. I will not be in the next episode if there's another. So take that under advisement.
Oh man, now I just want to slow it down.
That's fine.
just to-
Yeah, you can have me on. So we're gonna start with 2 Peter. We're gonna get it moving. Chapter 3. And we only have like 3 passages today, so it'll be a
Yep.
quick jump to that. And this is used oftentimes to talk about the end of the world and Jesus coming back and all those things. And but listen with an ear to what creation has to do with it all. So starting in verse 10, but the day of the Lord will come like a thief, and then the heaven will pass away with a loud noise, and the elements will be dissolved with fire, and the earth and everything that is done on it will be disclosed. Since all these things are to be dissolved in this way, what sort of persons ought you to be in leading lives of holiness and godliness, waiting for and hastening the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be set ablaze and dissolved, and the elements will melt with fire? But in accordance with this promise, we wait for new heavens and a new earth where righteousness is at home. So it sounds like from this that it's all going to burn.
Right.
At least that's how it's viewed. Everything is going to be burned to the ground, and then there's a new thing that happens. And so it says the heavens are going to disappear, which we've talked about multiple times. It may be the divine realm, or it could just be the up there area.
There
It's
are
going to
multiple heavens.
right, and the earth is going to be laid bare, and then this new thing comes along. So this is kind of a different take on it. The prophets talked about maybe a restoration or a change, an adaptation where things like mountains are lowered or things or such like that. This is all new. Like the whole, seemingly, there's a huge destruction of it all, making way for a new thing.
Yeah, and I think this is where some Christians get this mentality of, well, it doesn't matter; it's all going to burn.
Yeah.
So what we do with this world is immaterial; it's irrelevant. So we don't really take it seriously. I think this is the passage that causes people to think in those kinds of terms.
Yeah. So why is it that maybe perhaps not the best way to view it? And what do you guys see, like maybe in the details of the passage that goes against that kind of reading?
Well, I would say a couple things. Obviously, he's using apocalyptic language, and that may not always be taken literally. On the one hand, on the other hand, he's. I feel like he's less talking about the creation and more talking about the humanity, because he's talking about things are going to be disclosed. People's what they've done or not done. It's more of a judgment scene on humanity using fire and laid bare imagery rather than, and see, this is what's going to happen to the earth and pulling a doctrine out of it. And so I think viewing it in light of what he's talking about in the surrounding context, we should focus more on the judgment of humanity than the destruction of the world. But the imagery is still there nonetheless.
I mean, it sounds very Old Testament to me. The sun will be dark and the moon will be turned to blood. That kind of imagery. And I mean, that imagery, I think people recognize, but it doesn't mean it was meant to be taken literally. So, if we're thinking in terms of Old Testament imagery, that should cause us to go, okay, it's serious, but is it literally going to be destroyed with fire? Is that the plan? I've heard some people say, well, God said he'd never destroy it with water, but he'll destroy it with fire. As if that's somehow relevant to the understanding of the passage. But I don't know if it's taking into account enough of the Old Testament imagery to really try to make sense of it.
Yeah, we spend an episode talking about metaphorical language of earthly destruction.
Yeah.
And and why they're in the same book with imagery that clearly has continuity of things on this earth going into the new age of God's favor. And this is kind of like that too. I mean, it ends with new heavens and new earth, which has a context back in the Old Testament, which is from Isaiah. And Isaiah is very much a book that has the new heavens and earth are, an upgrade of this heavens and earth, like a restoration. There's still Zion, there's still animals and, bodies of water and celestial bodies as well. Isaiah is pretty clear that there's future hope that's earthly in its use of language of a new heavens and new earth. And so he's quoting Isaiah, which draws us to that language. But even more so, I think, in the details of this text, language of destruction is used more with heavens
Yeah.
than with earth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's tied directly to what you were saying, Sam, about this passage is about morality. Like when it comes to the heavens, they will pass away with a loud noise. The elements will be destroyed. Now, elements, again, this is, I think, stoicheia.
I'd have to look it up, but that sounds right. I can see it being that word.
And these
yeah.
are like, these are like, the language for elements here, this is not the way to talk about the earth.
Right, because when we hear the word elements, we're thinking about the periodic table or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's not how they thought back then. Stoicheia is not a periodic table of elements, but rather it's kind of the things that uphold the world. It's almost like the pillars that uphold a roof or something like that. It's just like this is how the world is put together.
Yeah, it's used in a diverse way. Like even in philosophical works, like that language is used of like wind,
Yeah.
fire, air are like elements, right? And then like this language is sometimes used of like heavenly beings even are among the elements, the elemental spirits. That phrase shows up elsewhere. Like the power, the invisible powers and principalities.
Yeah, Colossians is like an area where that word it comes up.
Yep.
And like people debate the meaning of it in Colossians as well.
Yeah, so it's clearly it's not a clear word that refers to the stuff of earth.
Right.
It's definitely more abstract than that. And here it's in context with the heavens passing away. It's in parallel with that, the elements being destroyed with fire, and the earth and everything that's done on it. That's like a third thing. Like the heavens, this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
The elements, that's happening. And then the earth, everything that is done on it will be disclosed. And it reminds me, I don't know if this is the same language when we saw in Romans where creation is eagerly longing for the children of God to be revealed.
Yeah, Romans 8.
Right?
Yep.
So is that word for revealed the same thing as the word for disclosed here?
You asked me a
Yeah.
question. I want to go back and take a look. I don't
Yeah.
have my Greek text in front of me, so.
But the word here is disclosed.
Yeah.
Right? Laid bare, or things will be seen for what they are.
Right.
Right? It's not, and the earth will be destroyed.
Well, yeah.
That's not what happens on earth. On earth, the things that are done on it will be visible to all,
Yeah.
revealed to everyone the wickedness that has done. And in light of that, what kind of life should you live? Well, we should live godly lives so that when everything is made visible, when they look at us, they would see godliness. And then when you have the new heavens and new earth at the end, it's like where righteousness is at home. Like right now we're living godly lives, but it's almost not at home because all this wickedness is happening around us. But when God's done with his purging, cleansing of the earth, destruction of the elemental spirits that work against us, right? In leading righteous lives and that strive to work against God's purposes but will fail. When all of that is eliminated and everything on earth is seen for what it truly is, we will have joy because we've chosen to live these godly lives. So it's about morality, and the destruction language is reserved more for these abstract elements and the heavenly realm and not used specifically to talk about the earth will be burned with fire. That phrase isn't here.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it's important to recognize what Peter's trying to do. Where are we going to put our focus? What's going to really motivate us? And we should be looking forward to this period of restoration that God is going to bring about. God said, I'm going to create a new heavens and new earth. And so we should do everything in this life to prepare for that ultimate restoration. Part of it is to look at this world and say, don't be too attached to it. This world is destined towards recreation. And some of this extreme language just helps us to realize that this world, as we know it at least, is not going to last forever. There is a recreation that's on the way. And so orient yourself towards that recreation rather than what you see around you. And here I think it kind of gets a little extreme. Like we're going to burn up the heavens and all that. That's just imagery to help us, I think, reinforce that central idea. Focus on the new creation, not what you see around you. Hold on loosely, but don't let go.
Yes. Oh, yikes. Hold on. Okay.
Yeah.
So for those Greek philes in the audience, the word here is eurisko, as in to find, disclose, something
Okay.
like that. And then the word in Romans is apocalypso, like apocalypse.
Oh, Revelation.
Yeah.
I just want to make one other comment. Like, you're the outdoorsy guy.
Big time.
On the one hand, sometimes fire is used to restore, right?
Oh, yeah.
You have a bunch of dead, decaying stuff. You burn it, which then allows new growth and better. I wonder if that is in their minds at all or not. This idea of like the burning doesn't necessarily mean to dust. It could mean like, you brush cut or brush fire it back so that you can actually get good stuff growing in its place. And that's what I think of when I look at these passages. It doesn't necessarily have to mean like to dust, but it can mean it burns down and then new stuff is able to grow from the result of that.
Yeah, there's certain kinds of trees that actually grow best when there's been a fire.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people recognize that that's part of the cycle of nature, that every now and then, you'll get a big forest fire or grass fire, or whatever, that it's destructive but also cleansing.
Yeah.
Because it gets rid of the old dead stuff and it creates space for the new stuff.
Yeah,
so that's an interesting way of thinking about
And that's why they do controlled burns. Is to,
Yeah,
if there's these
exactly.
old, dead, dry things, it's going to catch at some point. So they burn it off and then allow good new stuff that's not as dry and dead, less likely to catch on fire.
it. Yeah.
So you think about the world as dead and decaying and full of rottenness. The burning purifies it, cleanses it, and allows a new garden to grow.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But for me, when people are using this to make the argument about, see, God's going to burn the earth up with fire, to me, the thing that makes that a non-starter is both in verse 10 and in verse 12, what is burned and destroyed with fire is heavens and elements. Right? That's in verse 10 and in verse 12, because of which the heavens will be set ablaze and destroyed, and the elements will melt with fire. It doesn't say it about the earth.
Yeah.
And elements just isn't a word that means earth.
Right.
It's like first principles. It's even used in Pauline language to talk about like false ideas and ideologies that
Yeah.
people live by. It's not, this is not a passage that even read literally. We're making a case that this should be read metaphorically,
Mm-hmm.
right? But even when read literally, the earth is not on the burning block, right?
Yeah.
It's the heavens. And so I question for you guys, like, why the heavens? Why would the heavens be, obviously the point of this whole passage is live godly lives so
Right.
that when God does his judgment, you will be at home in the new heavens where all the junk is removed.
Yeah.
Why is the heavens like targeted for fiery destruction twice?
I wonder, so I haven't thought about this before. You're asking a question I haven't applied myself to. So if I'm way off base, that's fine. Part of me makes me think of like the idea of the firmament, this kind of dome over the earth. They didn't see the heavens the way we do, as this like, infinite space that you can travel through. You had this idea of a firmament that like was this dome over the earth. And so I wonder if part of it was just their understanding of cosmology. If there is this physical barrier out there that is going to get burned up. Again, I don't know that, but it just pops into my mind. I'm just trying to think like a person in the first century would think. So maybe.
Yeah, I definitely lean towards more of a cosmological understanding, but just because I would have to hear a good reason how they think the divine realm is going to be burned up.
Right.
Right? Like
why would God's abode get torched?
right.
And
It
what
doesn't-
would that, if it was the divine abode was being torched, what does that have to do with godly living on earth?
Yeah. For me, it's like when it says the heavens are going to be burned up and the earth is going to be like laid bare, like everything you see is going to be renewed. It's going to be changed.
Right.
That's for me. That's what you take. There's the takeaway. Not God's throne is going to melt and like what are we talking about? That would make no sense to them.
Right.
And the only other option would be that the destruction would be of the pagan divine realm. I don't even know if that's even a possibility, but the idea of like, so all these other like Roman mythologies and Roman religions, that's going to be like destroyed too because it's not real. I mean, that's another possibility, but I think that's a little far fetched.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and there's at least you have 3 layers of heaven. You know, you got the clouds and the birds and all that. That's like the lowest heaven. Then you got the middle heaven where the stars are. And kind of like that's the firmament,
Yeah.
you know, where the stars and everything are. That's that hard dome. The heaven of heavens, the ultimate heaven where God's dwelling is. I don't think they're talking about that. We're not going to destroy God's
That'd be
dwelling.
weird.
But they can talk about the heavens at a lower level, either the cloud area or the star area. And like I said, when it talks about it being burned up, I would think that that's probably what they have in mind, not where God's throne is.
Yeah, I think the 3-layer heavens is kind of interesting in terms of thinking about this. And we just finished. I'm teaching an intertestamental literature course on Mondays, and we just finished reading the martyrdom and ascension of Isaiah.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually, ascends through the different layers of heavens to like have a vision of God. And what they're trying to really do is capture his, Isaiah 6 throne
Mhm,
vision,
right.
right? But in the lowest level of the heavens, there are spirits,
Oh, yeah.
and they're the spirits that are at work in this world. And they're spirits that should be doing good and working for the good of things, but they're not. And so at the lower level of the heavens, you have these wicked spirits that exercise influence over the world. And as you get to the higher ones, they don't get to go any higher than
Right.
that. Like they're blocked off. And so when you think of even language in the New Testament of like Jesus, or in the Gospels, like Satan being called the prince of the powers of the air,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? That's that image that in the heavenly realm, there are these spirits that are at work doing stuff in the world that's negative.
Mm-hmm.
Those spirit, I mean, that's when you get to like Colossians, that's where stoicheia or Kaya, I don't know how you say it.
Either way. Doesn't matter.
That's where that language is used in association with these powers and principalities that are going to get judged.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if this destruction in the heavens that's happening is the spiritual forces of wickedness in high places that is going to be dealt with once and for
Mhm.
all. And then on earth, everything's going to be laid bare, all the wickedness, which means judgment day, and all the wicked people will be removed from it, which means there was a new heavens and a new earth
Mhm.
where righteousness can be at home, which is the hope that the Old Testament, this is the restoration of all things
Yeah.
that Peter was preaching about not too far after Pentecost.
Right.
Yes, that makes sense of the cosmology aspect of it, the multiple heavens, and of course, if you're talking about like morality and things, if these spirits are like causing humans to do or encouraging humans to do like various sins, like yes, that being burned up would make sense as well. It's all being laid bare. That's not going to be a thing anymore. The new heavens, new earth won't have those adverse temptations.
And it also makes me think of like John's vision in Revelation. I don't think this is a verse we're going to read, but he talks about seeing a door open in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have sort of this barrier that's maybe keeping some of these spirits in their proper place, it's like you can ascend through the first, but you get to the second heaven, it's like you can't go any higher.
Mm-hmm.
And like for John to see beyond that into God's throne room, you got to open up this door,
Right.
like you got to create this gap that allows you to see beyond the firmament. So I could see that kind of playing into that same idea.
Yeah, and that this is part of their worldview. I think the worldview of 2 Peter, if you go to chapter 2, and it's talking about the false prophets and their punishment. In verse 4, it says, "For if God did not spare the angels when they sinned and cast them into hell and committed them to chains of deepest darkness to be kept until the judgment, and if he did not spare the ancient world, even in the time of Noah and etc., like they for them, the conceptual world of Enoch and the watchers,
Mhm.
these evil spirits that did evil things on earth getting judged, like that's part of the conceptual furniture
Right. Yeah.
of 2 Peter. That lends the fact that they might think that there is a modern day equivalent to that in these spirits in the heavenly realm
Yeah.
that still kind of make life difficult for humans here on earth, and that God's judgment is upon them.
Yeah.
So it's a little context from within the book that they may, have this kind of worldview of erring angels and spirits that tinker with things on earth.
Yeah. Well, and I think the big takeaway is don't read it like it's written to 21st century modern people who are thinking about the world, as a globe circling the sun, and that the elements refer to the elements the way we think of. What we're trying to do is think like first century Christians did, first century Jews, first century Christians, and their conception of the world is reflected in Peter's language. And so if we can inhabit their headspace, then we're going to understand what he's saying there much better.
Sure.
Next passage we're going to look at is from Revelation, jumping close to the end here, Revelation 21, verses 1 through 5, where John writes, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them, and they will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away.' And the one who was seated on the throne said, 'See, I am making all things new.' Also he said, 'Write this, for these words are trustworthy and true.'"
Do you want me to read the next chapter too, and we can discuss them together?
Sure.
Sounds good.
That seems reasonable.
So as he's right after this, he describes this new Jerusalem, right? That came out of heaven, presumably down to the new earth, right? And it says in 22, after saying that there was no temple in the city, kind of because the glory of God is kind of there, and they don't need a temple. And then 22, it says, "The angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb, through the middle of the street of the city. And on either side of the river is the tree of life, with its 12 kinds of fruit, producing its fruit in each month. And the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. Nothing accursed will be found there any more, but the throne of God and of the Lamb will be in it, and his servants will worship him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads, and there will be no more night. They need no light of lamp or sun, for the Lord God will be their light, and they will reign forever and ever."
So this gives it's what Peter mentioned about this new heavens and new earth. John is describing in a little more detail of what it'll look like, and the new Jerusalem and the river and all the plants and all that goes with it. Sounds pretty great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it has a function within the book of Revelation to inspire people who are suffering. They're suffering in their cities, either being killed or at the very least, they're being ignored, and they can't make money and they can't feed their families. And they're like, "Why should I keep serving God when all these bad things are happening as a direct result?" And John says, because this is what we can look forward to. Those people who are persecuting you are not going to experience this blessed new creation, but we are. And that creation's worth whatever little suffering we have to go through now.
Yeah. In chapter 22, it's definitely Eden language.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Right? I mean, there's rivers, and there's
of life.
especially the tree of life. So this is New Eden.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a culmination of what the prophets were talking about, of this new era of all the streaming. And like, yep. So Isaiah and Ezekiel, you're right, and it's going to look like this, and it's going to be great, and it's going to replace all the things. Now he's adapting it, like it's a little bit different. I think Isaiah may have had more of an idea of like a more earthly sort of thing, where it's going to change here on earth as opposed to like a new thing. But John's basically building on their understanding and their language, and as you said, providing an image that persecuted Christians could latch onto.
Yeah, and I love how he does not contradict the older visions of like Isaiah 65, 66, visions of Ezekiel. He ties right into it. He's like, what God said back then is still what he's saying now. Now, as you said, Sam, he kind of maybe takes it to a new level, but not in a way that contradicts. He just expands it even further. He recognizes it's the same God who inspired, Isaiah and Ezekiel, who was now giving him this vision. And so there is no discontinuity. Like I said, the only difference might be he's just blowing it up even larger so we understand it more comprehensively.
Yeah. But Ezekiel doesn't get his temple.
Correct.
That is
Yeah.
the difference,
Yep.
right? But the point is not that, sorry, Ezekiel got it wrong. The whole
Right.
purpose of the temple is to represent the presence of
Mhm.
God.
Right,
And it's like, we're not even going to need a structure to represent the presence of God. We're going to have the presence of God.
Yeah.
And so, like, the fulfillment is bigger than the promise.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Right.
different, but in a way that's bigger. It's not different in the way that, wait, you promised me one thing and you gave me something totally different. I promised you a structure that, that the presence of God inhabits, and I've replaced it with the presence of God, more directly.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, and John doesn't ignore the temple language. Earlier in the book, he's called to measure out the temple. And so there's temple imagery in the book of Revelation. And so that's where you can see Revelation tying into Ezekiel. But then you get to the end of it, and it's like, all right, that temple was important at a time, but in the new creation, we don't need a temple anymore. And so, yeah, the temple imagery shows up, but at a different time period. There is there's no need for a temple in the new heavens and new earth.
yeah, and it makes sense because Ezekiel was he was a Zadokite priest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was the priestly family that was favored by Solomon and the construction of the temple.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, when God's kind of given him a vision of future hope, he's going to speak through him in the world language imagery that means a lot to Ezekiel
Yeah.
as a priest, especially Jerusalem-centric priest.
Right.
So, yeah, we see continuity here. And again, it's like the New Jerusalem comes down. That's significant.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming down to apparently an earthly realm.
Right.
Where there's things like rivers and the tree of life, which means food. And so it's an earthly kind of thing. And it does talk about, especially in the beginning, just, the old has passed away, right? And then there's new.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's like when God so overhauls this place, the old is gone
Mm-hmm.
and it's a new. It for the Jews in the Jewish mindset and the early Christian, it's not always the first thing has to get destroyed and the second thing has to replace it. New can mean renewed,
Right.
new state of affairs, better the way God anticipated from the beginning.
And I mean, you don't get the impression that it's going to be unrecognizable. He's using imagery that they would, like trees and rivers and things. It's not like something brand new, like you've gone to some alien world, like, oh, like all of a sudden the water is not water, it's something else. Like,
We're
no,
on
it's
Pandora now.
right. It's something new,
Yeah.
but it's using it's common imagery, common understanding. And so when it says new earth, it just means, like I said, renewed, like the way it should be. Trees that bloom that don't have worms in them. Like in the fruit. Things like that. We're like, that's not going to be a thing anymore.
Yeah, and he can see like this passing away and that because this is a vision. Like in a vision, he's seeing the earth, the corrupt earth as we experience it, and as they were experiencing it with people killing Christians,
Yeah.
right? Or at least Christians being ostracized severely from society. It's like that reality is gone, and there's a new reality where righteousness is at home.
Yep.
It's a vision, and the question is, what is the vision standing for? And I assume it's standing for what the rest of the Old Testament has been talking about.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
resurrection from the dead to a new bodily existence on an earth that's been rid of sin,
Mm-hmm.
where we will have eternal life.
Yep.
Like, so even if he sees in the vision, the current thing passing away and the new thing replacing it, okay, you still have to ask the question, what does that stand for?
Yeah.
And don't just say, oh, then that's what's going to happen. Look, it passes away. The thing that replaces it is brand new. Therefore, this earth is toast. Over against other passages that talk about a universal restoration.
Right.
And fulfilling the hopes of the prophets. So this should be interpreted in continuity with them. And I think the fact that this is what he sees in a vision, and that in apocalyptic literature, what you see in a vision is not the exact reality, but an image that points to the reality. So in Daniel, you see in a vision a beast with multiple horns pointing to, the empire of Greece under Antiochus Epiphanes.
Right.
It's the thing it points to that is the reality that we look forward to, not the apocalyptic pointer.
Right.
So people can fixate too much, and you can even fixate too much on this image of a city coming out of the sky.
Right.
That again is not. that's the apocalyptic pointer. What is the reality on the ground it's pointing to?
How are we all going to fit in one city?
And it's a
Exactly.
It's not
giant
big
cube.
enough. Yeah.
It's a giant cube.
Right.
That's a really weird shaped
Yeah.
city. Yeah. And the fact that it's using, Eden language, as you pointed out, John, it's like this is all going back to the creation account. It sounds very Eden-like. And so I think it speaks to this idea that God had a plan at creation, and it was a good plan that incorporated flourishing for the whole world. And human sin has really, corrupted that plan. And God's plan is to not just get rid of what he created, but to make it new again. Like I had a good plan, and I'm not throwing that plan out. Let's get back to that original plan. Let's get this idea of a new Eden. And that's what we're all hoping for. We're not hoping to go to heaven someday, sit on clouds playing harps. That's just not the vision. The vision is let's get back on track with what God was thinking at the beginning.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's our last passage.
Amen.
And we have about
Yeah.
10 minutes to wrap up the series.
We can do it.
And we want to, we're very organized in how we're doing this time. Sometimes we are, sometimes we're not. And this is, what I'm going to share is kind of comes out of, I just published another book called Priestly Presence with Fortress Press. And in it, I have a section on creation care. So check that out if you want to. But in it, I talk about 6 different approaches to the world, 6 different possible approaches. And I want to share these 6 with you guys and have you respond. Like, all right, we've just been through what the Bible says. Does this approach fit what we found in the Bible?
Okay.
And there's some easy ones that are
Sure.
fat, hard-nosed. But so the first kind of approach to creation that some people can have is what I call escapist. God will someday destroy this earth and take us to heaven, so we shouldn't worry too much about it.
Well, that's a good straw man that you set up there. Thank you, John. Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of things wrong with that. For example, the idea of destroying the earth. The first passage we come across that says anything close to that is the Peter passage. And I think we've thoroughly said that's not exactly what's probably going on.
It doesn't even literally say the earth is destroyed.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's probably take us to heaven. We have a whole series on that, which is also probably not exactly how it's going to work. More of a new earth for us to live on. And shouldn't worry too much about it. I think Torah would probably disagree with that. There's a lot of discussion about worrying about creation and how to take care of it. So the 3 points you make there in that description kind of not holding water for me.
All right. So
Yeah. Well, and to
Ixnay to
summarize it, I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt.
Go ahead.
Okay.
No,
just-
after you.
I think that what you've done, Sam, is what we'd always want to do is we want to take the full witness of Scripture into account. The escapist view doesn't seem to know the Bible very well.
Yikes.
I'll
Yeah.
let you respond to the second one.
Okay,
just for the
sounds
sake of time.
Oh.
We don't have more than like a minute and a half for each of these.
All right,
so.
Fair.
no problem.
So the second possible approach is survivalist. This earth is all there is, with no future other than what we make for it. So we need to care for it so humans will continue to have a place to live.
Yeah, I mean, similar to what Sam said, I think the survivalist hasn't really understood the message, both Old and New Testament, of God's plan for renewal, for new creation, new heaven, new earth. There's more to it than just surviving. And so once you listen to God's full plan, becoming a follower of Jesus is embracing that plan. And it's more than just surviving. It's looking forward to a better future.
Sure.
And there's no evidence in the Bible that we can, that the future of creation is solely in human hands.
Right.
Oh, for
Like,
real, yeah.
There's the survivalist is, we don't have the whole world in God's hands, and in the Bible
Right.
we do.
Just like the song says.
Amen.
All right. Third approach is the animist. This earth is quasi-divine, or at least equal to humans on the scale of being, so creation should be revered and cared for religiously.
So that assume. So it's like saying if I built a chair out of a piece of wood, the chair becomes human because I built it. Like that's the implication, is that because God made it, it's now also divine. And I don't think the Bible reveals that to be true anywhere. It is created by God as good. It is imbued with, I think, the power that is part of who God is, but it's not God. And equal on scale, probably not exactly true. Genesis would suggest that the pinnacle of creation was humanity, who then sort of are stewards or caretakers of the rest of it. So I would suggest that, yes, it should be cared for religiously turns turns what we do into something else
Yeah.
that the Bible never seems to encourage. In fact, a lot of the pagan cults were very tree oriented, and those were often cut down. So I would suggest it's not the case.
Yeah. If you're going to say quasi-divine of anything, it'd be humans, like made in
Yes.
God's image.
Right.
But that's in contrast to the rest of creation.
Yeah.
Right.
With no connection to the divine image in the text. So, all right. So the next four are definitely next three. Thank you. The next one is number 4,
Yep.
but the next 3 are kind of in the ballpark of where I think most Christians land.
Yeah.
And so, all of them I think convey truth, but maybe there's something missing. So number 4 is the creationist approach. That is that God created the earth as a good creation and placed humans above it to care for it on his behalf.
Yeah, and I would absolutely affirm that. I think that's true. Like, I can't find fault with that. The only thing I'd say with it is just incomplete. There's more to the story, but that's where the story begins. And I think that understanding should inform our engagement with creation. God didn't revoke his plan for humanity. He just said, you're making bad decisions. We need to do something about that. But we still, I think, have a responsibility to recognize our place to care for creation on God's behalf. That's part of why we're here.
I would say that if it goes to the point of saying, and if we don't, it'll fall apart, I think that's not a very, like, when you say on
Okay,
his
yeah.
behalf, right? It
Right.
depends where you go with that. Like, yes, he's tasked us with this, but it's not as though if we don't, God's like, oh, well, then it'll all blow up and you'll see how, God is still working and doing
Yeah.
things even outside of us. And so it's more of a co-working together as opposed to, it's all in your hands, humans, don't screw it up. And if that's the view, I think that's not quite right.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Point.
Yeah. Agreed. All right. Number 5. I'm calling this the restorationist.
Very Stone Campbell of you.
God began to restore this world through Jesus and invites us to join that work in anticipation of its ultimate completion. Restorationist.
Well, and I would say that's the second half of the creationist point of view. The creationist point of view has to recognize that at some point sin entered the world. Human beings make bad decisions, and the world is suffering as a direct consequence of that. And God has made a promise that that's not always going to be the case, that he is going to fix the brokenness of this world. And what we want is to be a part of that new creation. And so I think the restorationist is the second half of that equation.
Yeah, so the first one doesn't quite have eschatology, doesn't have anything about the end times.
Yeah.
And the second one says, and God's not done with this world, and he's going to come back and finish it. And
Right. And that's right in the face of the escapist. The escapist just wants to get away.
Yeah.
And the restorationist says, no, we don't want to get away because God's got a good plan for this world and we want to be a part of it, not get away from it.
I would say, again, this one is fine depending on how far you take it.
Yeah.
If it's, and we need to get it to the point that it's fully restored in order for Jesus to come back
Oh,
or something along those lines.
yeah, right.
Like that's going way too far.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's a limiting aspect. Like there's only so much we can do. The rest has to be done by God. So
Yeah.
it's kind of
Yeah.
let's put that out there.
Yeah, and my only thing that I wouldn't like about this one is it's not clear that when Jesus came, that creation itself started changing.
For the better, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and this leads back to our conversation about Romans 8. It's groaning for the revelation of the children of God, because it knows that when we are revealed in the coming day to be the forerunners of God's new creation, that then it will receive its restoration. And so some advocates of the restorationists believe, I think, that Jesus already started restoring the earth when he came the first time. And we don't quite see a difference in the earth itself, inanimate creation, with the coming of Jesus. We have the hope that he is the turning point of world history and anticipates the day when that will happen, and is the Messiah who will make sure that does happen. But it's kind of on hold, and which does kind of transition to the sixth view, the one I put forward as my new proposal. And I don't know if anyone teaches this view, and maybe if you do, please let me know. I need to add a footnote that
Didn't make it in the first
my next
edition.
project. but what I call a new creationist approach. And so this view agrees with the creationist position that God created the earth good and has tasked humans to take good care of it. It also agrees with the restorationist that God will someday restore non-human creation fully. However, the new creationist remains uncertain that this restoration has already begun, based on Romans 8. And I think we also saw this, I think in James, where it's the believing community is the first fruits of the new creation, not the rocks and plants started getting remade because Jesus rose from the dead, right? So it's not just Romans 8. But rather, in Christ, God has begun a new creation in the midst of the old, and God's kingdom people are that new creation, the first fruits of the world to come. The restoration of God's new humanity, even among the people of God, is still incomplete, right? So even though we're the first fruits of the new creation, we are not the fullness of new creation. We will realize our completion when non-human creation experience its restoration for the first time, when Jesus returns. So in the meantime, we live in harmony with all creation in ways that anticipate the future harmony of God's full kingdom. When possible, we include non-human creation in the new creation life that we have already begun to experience. So we eagerly include non-human creation in our new creation life that they might experience it secondhand through us. This is something that only the Christian community can do and is possible only because the gospel of Christ and his kingdom. So that's my proposal for a new creationist stance.
So for some clarification, you're suggesting that what separates it from the tension that we feel in the now and not yet of God's kingdom is that while we have begun to be restored and in the new creation, creation has not.
Right.
Is that correct? Okay.
Correct. And that, our part of our witness, I think, can be to envelop, inanimate creation, and I would say even animals, right, in kingdom life.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's something about, if a farmer goes out and is a good steward of his soil and plants the seeds and waters it and grows a garden, great. Like that's a good creationist view. You've taken good care of God's creation. You've cooperated with it respectfully and borne good fruit. If the new humanity, if the church comes together for a community garden, right, and then across, with the walls broken down between different people of different ages and ethnicities, and together we do this community garden and share of its fruit with those who are needy, and right, like we are enveloping old creation, inanimate creation, in the work of new creation that God has begun in us.
Yeah.
And it is getting to experience the future with us, as a part of us, secondhand through us. So a kind of witness that is eager to go one step further than just be a good steward of, but like, hey, let's do real kingdom stuff, not just in like walled off buildings, right, in padded pews, but like in God's creation. And so in my book, I give an example of my dog, right, Reese, and that would be a story about animals and not necessarily about inanimate creation, but like we would have, pool parties with our church, and like people would be baptized in the pool, and we'd have giant parties, and like my dog is out there with us playing, laughing, lapping up water, involved, like guarding the edge to make sure no one falls in and making sure everyone's okay. And like he like entered into this new joyous kingdom life we have together and are celebrating as a body. And even though he doesn't know what's going on and can't experience it the way we do, we've enveloped him into that new creation experience. It's a level of witness that only we can do.
Yeah, for me, I wrote this down a couple episodes ago. It's just this finding a balance between being stewards and being restorationists, right? Where we've been given a job to do, to take care of God's good creation. At the same time, it's so racked with sin and the effects of sin that you can only do so much. And it sounds like what you're talking about is just another opportunity to like see God's kingdom come in little glimpses, in little small ways, but the fullness is far yet to be. right? And so, yeah, when you make a garden and you see it grow and you weed it and it's like, this is it, right? Well, that gives you just a foretaste of what is to come. And so that, like with everything in our lives, we should be looking for foretastes of God's kingdom coming in its fullness.
Yeah.
So spending time with each other and eating good food and like eschewing sin and like striving for holiness. Like these are all little things that we do, and creation is just one more aspect that we could add to our list of seeing God's kingdom come.
Agree.
Yeah. And I think what concerns me about the restoration is that Christ has already begun the work. It's our job to join him and do that until it comes. It's then our relationship with creation becomes work. Right? And then, but the kingdom is a gift. Our new life together is a gift. We receive it as a gift. We enter into that new life as a gift. And we want to share that gift with each other. We want to share it to unbelievers who have not seen that gift. We want to share that gift with the animals and with the land and with the trees. The new thing God has begun, the gift we want to share. The restorations can just be just more work that Christians have to do. God wants to fix this world, get to work helping him. And then like, attaboy when he gets there. You started the job, I get to finish it. It's in an economy of work. And I'm trying, this new creations, I'm trying to switch to an economy of grace and gift. So
Gotcha.
anyway, something to think about.
And with that, I think we've reached the end of our study of creation
Praise
care.
the Lord.
So now we got to come up with our next topic, which we will before our next episode.
Which we haven't begun to talk about yet.
I know, but we
Yeah.
will. We have to, because next week we got to start a new topic.
Yep. But until then, thanks for joining us this episode of the After Class podcast, After Class because
The best conversations happen.
After class.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the After Class Podcast. ACP is hosted by Sam Long, John Nugent, and Ron Peters. Audio production is provided by Drew Nyquist. Social media is managed by Darren Harris.